Welcome back to Tabletop Ready Games painting tutorial. Today we're going to work on scatter terrain. What we're going to work on is building a fence. Alright, so you're going to take your MDF, or you can use the cardboard, the heavy duty cardboard. You can use that laminated foam board, any rigid stock. I used the MDF, filed it down. Here we have some mesh netting. This is from an old screen door that's no longer good. I just cut strips out of it. You can use coffee stirrers, work really well for this. I use popsicle sticks, the big tongue depressors, cut them into pieces about the same height as the mesh. Just use an X-Acto knife. I actually found the 10 snips work really good for cutting these without splitting the popsicle sticks. Just be careful, because if you only score one side, they tend to break uneven. And then after you score it, you should be able to snap it down the line and then cut the extra fibers. They pull apart pretty easy. And just trim that up. Now you can use different things. You can use PVA glue. I'm using the Gorilla super glue. You can use any super glue. You can use the hot glue gun. I personally like the super glue because I can put it where I want it. I can fast set it. The hot glue gun tends to have a little extra. Once I put something, if I don't like where it is, then I'm kind of stuck where it is. The super glue really helps kind of define where I want to put something, and then I use the quick activator, and that seems to do the trick. You can use thick cardboard or the heavy paper stock for this instead of the wood, but you're going to see later that we're going to be using it, or how we're going to be using it, that I don't know about the durability of how that's going to hold up. I know with experience using the wood, it really creates a heavy-duty base, and I haven't had any problems with durability or problems with the terrain on the table, because this is going to be used for a war game. I mean, you can use it for building fences, you can use it for dioramas. This is just some basic techniques. This one, just kind of center it in the middle. You're going to run a bead of glue down. Try to focus you to make sure you see everything. Just hold it in place. Put your glue. And then just plop the stick right down on top of it. We'll trim that little bit of excess wood up later. Now what you want to do is you want to get your base and just simply mark the edges so that you're centering it up on the base. You can run this if you wanted to. You could do your base stock so that it was flush with the outside fence, so that you could put fences together if you wanted to have a long line of fences. I'm just using this as fence barricades kind of idea, so I didn't really need them touching. But again, when you're doing this, you're going to do it the way you need it, to fit your needs. And then just draw a line in the middle, and you see the reason for that is because I'm going to put a nice heavy bead of the super glue. And again, you can use the hot glue for this, but you need to work quickly with the hot glue, because then you're going to be able to. But the nice thing is, if you are using hot glue, then you can just hold it until the glue settled. Here I'm kind of balancing it so that I can get the activator on it. Once I got the activator on, it's not going anywhere. And don't worry about what the base looks like. You're going to get all that cleaned up later in the final steps when we decorate the base. Just a couple little. All right. And there you go. That's a rough base fence. I mean, that's playable as is if you just needed terrain on the table, but we're going to go ahead and fancy it up a little bit, make it a little nicer. So here what we're doing is we're using the X-Acto knife, and we're just trimming and making holes in this. Now this is like a plastic mesh fence, so it doesn't really bend the way like a metal would. I did one of these where I used screen repair pieces, and they were actually made of metal. And then the hobby knife works really well for making blemishes in the fence. And here I'm using one of my old pairs of shears, which have been nicked and damaged so many times I wasn't getting nice even cuts. I was more tearing it than cutting it. Pull out a new pair of snips to fix that problem. And like I said, we're just tattering up the edges a little bit. Just be careful that you don't poke yourself or cut yourself when you're doing these things. There's no rhyme or reason here. I didn't have any pattern. I just went to, like, all right, I'm just going to make some, like somebody tried to tear a hole in the fence, or it got hit by a wayward shell. Who knows? I would caution on taking too much off, because you do want the barricade or the fence to be there and visible. But you could also make a nice piece where maybe one of the fence sections had rolled down, and then what I would do is I would actually roll the mesh back and then tack it or glue it into place so that it looked like it had actually fallen off of the supports. There you go. You can kind of see what the finished product will look like. I'm going to use some Ryza Rust Dry. I'm going to put this right over the top of the mesh. Now try not to overbrush too much on the wood, but again, it doesn't really matter. We're going to do another step to this, which will help kind of blend things down. But what this does is it really kind of makes the fence look old and worn with very little effort. You can do this with an orange paint if you've got enough pigment, and let it just use a dry brush technique. Dab it, get most of the paint off, put it on the fence. But the Ryza Rust really has that nice, once it's dry, that really rusty kind of old effect. You can see I'm not being too careful here. There you go. Then we're going to use some Agrax Earthshade, and this we're going to apply liberally to the posts. This is going to add that weathering, aged effect. Again, go quite liberal with this. Make sure you saturate the wood. Not putting any other paint or anything on the wood. It's just the stain. sure you get all the inner cracks. There you go. All right, for the next part, we're going to use some Vallejo thick mud, some, I don't know, tufts, I think they're called, and we're going to use a mix of some turf cover. I think it's just like a green, and then I had some fine rocks. So this, I'm just going to smear liberally the mud on the base. I've got an old brush. Recommend using an old brush for this. It will destroy your brush. This is an old tank brush. I use it for this kind of thing. Anytime I've got a heavy wash or smearing base mud, I pull out this brush. And again, you don't have to be precise with this. We're just covering the whole base. And don't worry about getting it up to the bottom of the fence. You want to get it up to the fence to cover the glue line. The idea is that this fence has been sitting out for a long time, neglected, overgrown, ready to fall down. And you could use PVA glue if you don't have the mud. You could use watered down PVA or Elmer's or whatever name brand glue or off brand glue you want to use. And then put your tufts and your rocks over that. It'll do the same. The reason I like to use the mud is because I like to get some of the earth showing through, like it's worn. So when I do this, I don't just pour or shake this into the bin. I actually sprinkle it on. And I can kind of get, I mean, I wouldn't say precise, but I can get more uh, control over where I'm putting the grass and the stone. And that way some of the earth will show through, so you still get that dirt battlefield kind of look. And you can do this to your desire. Whatever, when you think it looks good, then go with it. Next, we're going to add some tufts. And again, this is completely random. I mostly put them up near the posts. I do have some super glue here. I find the tufts have a sticky on the bottom and the mud will adhere. But I find that using a little bit of the super glue and then putting them down really helps lock them in. And then as the super glue and the mud base dries, I haven't had any problems with any of my tufts falling off. I do like using a mixture of the tufts because that gives the kind of a visual distraction to the piece, so it doesn't just look monotone. Your eye is actually drawn to the different colors. You don't have to go too crazy. This is just a little bit of terrain on the table, just there to kind of be. You don't want your terrain piece to really stick out. You want it to be noticed, but you don't really want it to be the center of attraction. Obviously, the war game you're playing or the models you're using. But we want our terrain to look good. It adds realism to the battle, kind of immerses you in that in the feeling. One of the reasons that we play these games is for an escape from reality. All right. There you have it. So with about 15 minutes worth of work and just some scrap materials, we've got a nice piece of scatter terrain ready for the battlefield. All right. Thanks for listening. Hope this helped.